Hi, welcome to Perla Premium Video Tutorials. My name is John Deere and I'm going to give you a guided tour of this software program, show you all of the tools within the program and how to use them to create your own designs and to edit and do layouts of other designs that you might already have purchased. Now the first thing I want to do is show you the working area where you're going to be looking at the designs you created or where they will appear when you bring them into the program. We also have built-in designs. They're broken into all different categories, and as you click on any of the categories you'll see that the designs are changing. Then you can scroll down and choose the design that you're looking for. If I choose any of the designs and I left click on it with my mouse, it will highlight the design, and then all I have to do is left click and drag it onto the screen and it will bring it onto the screen for viewing. Now that our design is open and visible, I want to look over at the sequence view, and you're going to see that the colors in which the design was digitized are broken down over on the side here. I have my red hearts and I have my yellow hearts. Now also you're going to see this little plus sign. When I hit that, it's going to expand all of the objects that were used to digitize those hearts and show them in the sequence in which they were done. That's important because what I can do now is I can choose on any of those objects. It will come and identify itself by highlighting a black box around it, and then I can change any of the properties of that object which I have chosen. So if I have a heart with a standard fill, and I'm going to come up here and turn on my 3D, which will give me a visual of what it will actually look like when it's embroidered, I can see that we used our number one pattern. Simply by clicking this and choosing one of the other patterns and applying it, it's going to change the visual appearance of that fill stitch. Now you can do that for any of the objects within that color. I can choose this heart, and I can also change it from a standard fill to a fancy fill, and I can choose any one of the built-in patterns that are within the fancy fill, and I can click on it and apply it, and it will change that fill type so that I can really modify the design however I wish. Now this is something else which is kind of really neat. Sometimes if you have too much density within an object, I can see that these are run stitches, fill stitches, satin paths, and as I click on these satin paths, I can see that I want to grab just the satin stitches. So I'm going to grab all of these satin paths as I move along, and I do that by holding the control key down as I'm moving. Now the reason why is I want to just change the density of that one area. So now that I've chosen all of the satin stitches around this one heart here, I can see that in the properties it is a satin stitch, and if I want to decrease the density, I can change this from 0.4 millimeters of density between each stitch to, let's say, 0.8 millimeters. Hit the apply button and you're going to visually see how the density of that satin stitch has changed. So this gives you unlimited control of any object that has already been created or that you are digitizing. While we're looking at the features of the sequence view, I also want to show you a couple other things. Number one, we have a little eye that's beside each of the colored objects. If I click on that eye, you'll notice that all of the red has now disappeared. Now that's really useful because if you're digitizing a design that has many layers upon layers of embroidery on it, and as you create all of those layers, you can no longer see the original artwork that's underneath. So simply by clicking on those eyes, you can turn off or on those objects so they become visible on the screen. Now the other thing that we have available is this little lock, and if I click that lock, you're going to see that the lock just closed. Now here's the other problem I've had. If I've created a design and then I want to go in and edit that design afterwards, usually there's so many objects there that when I try to click something, everything but the item that I'm trying to click will actually become highlighted. So when I lock down that object, it means no matter how much I click anywhere within that red area, it is not going to highlight that object. But the yellow hearts are not locked down, so if I hit anywhere close to the yellow hearts, it will pick up that object as an entirety. Remember, you can always click that plus button, and then you can go in and you can grab specific objects and adjust those within your properties box. Okay, now that we've showed you some of the basics within the sequence view as well as the properties, we're just going to close that up and I'm going to show you some of the tools to modify your objects and designs. Now across the top here we do have a split wizard. This is an auto split wizard which will take a design and based on your hoop size will split that design for multiple hooping applications. We also have an auto basting stitch which you can then use for hoopless embroidery, so to speak. Now don't get me wrong, you always need a hoop to embroider with, but this will give you a basting stitch which will hold that fabric into place. There is name drops, distortion for distorting the design. There also is a fit to hoop function as well as an automatic color sort. Now color sorting can be handy when you're merging many designs using the same colors because you could have 5 designs brought in over and over again which have only 2 colors in them as you see here, but when you bring it back in 5 different times, you're going to have color
10.
changes as you bring it in. Now by hitting the color sort, that's going to bring it back to the original 2 colors. The only thing you have to be careful about is making sure that your material is properly stabilized and properly hooped because it will change the sewing order of the design and you could experience some things happening with push and pull compensation so the design no longer registers. Now there is a optimized entry point and also a optimized sequences as well. Okay, now here I do want to point out as well that within the help there is a Perla Premium Help Guide. This will come and show you all of the features and tools within Perla Premium, right from the basics to viewing designs. Everything that I'm going to be showing you, but much more, is within this help tutorial within the software. Here's a couple other simple tools to help modify your designs. If I click on any of the objects and then I hit Control A, it's going to highlight the entire design. Now I have the ability to flip the design horizontally. I can also flip the design vertically. I can rotate either to the right or to the left the design and create as many different layout options as I want. I also have a tool where I can automatically center the selected objects of the design. Now also remember, when you're creating designs within Perla Premium, these designs are object-based, which means that I can take my screen and adjust it to, let's say, a 1-to-1 scale, which this is the actual size of the design, and then I do have all of my different controls around the highlighted areas where I can increase or decrease that design, and it will adjust the density and the underlay and all the values of that design by simply taking it and rotating it manually on the screen, and I can distort it however I want until I'm happy with the desired layout. There are also various ways to view your designs. I can click off of 3D and it'll give me a lined drawing, so to speak, of the design, and if I zoom in to fit to screen, I can see the design and I can see all the individual stitches the way they are done as I digitize them. Now I can also show my stitch points. When I click on this, all of the penetrations, the needle penetrations, will become visible, and this is pretty handy when you're trying to work with patterns because you can see the actual pattern of the design. Now if I click it off, all of those little penetrations will simply disappear. I can also work with and without a grid, and that way the grid behind the design will appear or disappear, and sometimes working with the grid is handy because it gives you an idea of how far apart things really are. Now I also have my hoops. When I click on my hoop, it shows me the hoop outline. This can be handy to make sure that when you're doing design layout and you're bringing and merging in multiple objects, you know you're not going to create a design that just simply isn't going to fit. If you want to change the size of the hoop that you're working with, all you do is go to your view icon, and I can go to select hoop size, go to whatever flavor of machine you like to use, and you can actually choose the hoop size that you desire. You can also create new hoop sizes and rotate them, but when I apply, now I have a realistic view of the area that I'm working within. Now I can also come in here and choose backgrounds. I can choose colored backgrounds. Right now I'm working with a light gray, or I can choose fabric backgrounds, and there are preloaded fabric backgrounds here so that I can click on any one of these, bring it in, and it'll change the entire background. I'll take off the grid, and it gives me kind of a realistic viewing of the design, how it will look on the actual fabric when it's sewn out. So if I zoom in to my 1:1 scale, or I zoom into fit to screen, or let's actually use the zoom box, which is over here, it actually will give me an entire viewing of that design with the fabric background. Now there are multiple ways to view your designs. I can choose any one of the preset scales that are within the software, anywhere from 1 to 1 down to 10%, or all the way up to 600%. Now if you've ever watched my videos in the past, you'll know that I do like to digitize at a 600 or 300% scale, which is 6 to 1 or 3 to 1, because I like to have control of what I'm seeing. That way when I digitize something, I see the same thing over and over again, and I virtually know how it's going to sew out before I even take it and run it on the machine. Now there is also all of these command options, and if I go to my view screen, you're going to see commands is highlighted, and when I click on that, all of those little scissors and trim buttons are going to disappear off the screen. Now I can change this design to whatever size I want, fit to screen, zoom in, zoom out, and as I mentioned, I do have the magnifying glass here, which allows me to get in really nice and close on any object that I want to digitize, and I'll see exactly what I want to appear on the screen. Also keep in mind, as I'm working within my window, sometimes I do like to close some of my options like the browser and the library, as well as the design, so that I get a larger view of what I'm working on the screen. Now along the top bar as well, I also have my program preferences. This is very handy for changing the environment in which you're working with, whether you're working within English or metric, whether you are wishing to have an autosave, which is always kind of a useful thing to make sure you're doing. There's nothing worse than losing a design after you've put a couple hours into it. We also have our grid, and you can set up your grid specifically to how you want to see it. You can change the styles of how the grid is solid lines or dashed lines, or the grid is dotted lines. So whatever you feel comfortable with, it's good to set all that up at the beginning. Also the formats. The formats are very important because you can choose your specified machine format, but you can also choose the recipe in which you want to create the design. These are various fabric types, anywhere from fleece to jeans to leather, lycra, all the way to towels and velvet, and these become extremely useful. When I set, let's say, the jeans recipe, then all of the objects that I'm digitizing, whether it's a satin stitch or a running stitch or a fill stitch, all of the density, the underlay, the pull compensation, everything for all of those objects is going to automatically be saved for that recipe. Now you can also go in and you can close the properties box. You're going to notice that the properties box closes, and now we just have the sequence view, and I can go in there and view and turn off the sequence view as well within my design, so that if I don't want to see the sequence view, I can close that, and then I have a much larger working area to work within. It's going to open that up totally. Now that I have the working area, if I ever need to bring the properties back, I just have to click on that button and there they are. Also, if I want to bring the sequence view back, I can just click on sequence view and that will bring it back and restore it to where it was before. You do have unlimited undos and redos as well. So no matter how far you are along with your design, you can always go in and you can undo anything that has been done and bring it back by hitting redo. So it's not really a problem if you are unhappy with something. You don't have to start over. You can just sort of pick up where you want to be, and you can just continue on from there. There is also a print preview button. This will allow you to look at the design. It'll give you all of the layout, the stats for the design. There are options in which you can print the design, and you also have the ability to save your design, and you can save the design in multiple formats. You can open up new and existing designs, or you can create a new design. This will bring a totally new page onto the screen, and then you're ready to start digitizing, which is what we're going to do next. I'm going to show you some of the tools that you need to create your designs, and then how you can apply different stitch types to the objects that you've created. The first thing you're going to want to do when you start digitizing in Perla Premium is to bring in your artwork. Now, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can either import a vector art, which would be like an Adobe Illustrator file, or you can bring in a backdrop, which would be like a JPEG, GIF, TIFF, anything like that. Now, there is artwork built into the Perla Premium. It's under Perla Images, and we're going to scroll down and choose a design that's fairly simple and open it up, and it will bring it into the working area. Now, just so I can get a better look at this, I'm going to go to Fit to Screen, which brings it in, and all of the properties here are set up so that I can view the width and the height of the design. Remember, if you want to change it from metric to English, you can go into your properties, your program preferences right here, and you can change that in your environment from one to the other or back and forth. And then I can set up the exact size of the design. I can scale it by percentage. I can rotate it, and I can also take that image and I can make it a little darker or lighter if I want to. Now, sometimes if I'm dealing with artwork that is black, I do like to lighten it up a little bit so that as I'm digitizing my objects on top, I can see them being created, because usually those little outlines are a solid black, and black on black becomes difficult to see. Now that our artwork is on the screen and we've dimmed it a little bit so that it's easier to view, I'm going to show you some of the tools that you can use to create the objects while digitizing. Now, keep in mind that Perla is a little bit different in that it is actually creating artwork and then assigning stitch types to that artwork. We aren't creating objects and assigning stitches as we move along. It is really creating those objects and then assigning the stitches. So what we have to do is we have to draw those objects first. And to do that, we're going to have a couple different tools. Number one is a pen tool. Second is a Bezier, and third is a line. Now, those are the three standard art tools that we're going to use to create any object in any design. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to 600%, because 6 to 1 is the scale that I like to work at. And then with my arrow keys on the keyboard, right, left, up, and down, I'm going to scroll around the design so that I can get just to the area that I want to create. Now, when you are dealing with the pen tool will give you really a freehand motion. And if I am digitizing something that does have a very realistic or sketchwork type of thing that I'm really trying to achieve, then using that pen tool is really wonderful, because it's just like I'm drawing right on the screen. And then when I right click, it will turn it into artwork. And if I look over at my sequence view over here, it shows that it is right now a piece of artwork. It has no stitches assigned to it. It is just literally a line. If I do want to assign stitches to it, then when that is highlighted, you may have noticed that all of these objects across the bottom have appeared. And I do have three different categories. I have the running stitch category, the satin stitch categories, and the fill stitch categories, as well as all the bells and whistles, all those fun tools that everybody loves, and we'll get to those a little bit later on. But while this is artwork, I can click on my running stitch and it will turn that object into running stitches. And now I can see when I turn on the 3D, I do have that very jagged, hand-drawn type of look, and it has in my property boxes changed it to a single run, and I can control the stitch length and any other properties with regards to commands, tie-ins, tie-outs. All of that can now be adjusted because I have assigned a piece to the artwork. I've assigned one of the stitch types. I can always bring it back to artwork by clicking this star at the very end, and that will turn it back to the original artwork that I had in the beginning. Now that you've seen the pen tool in action, let's go for the next one, which is the Bezier. Now, if you have a graphic arts background, you're going to know that the Bezier is really defining things by anchor points. When I put 2 points down, it automatically gives me an anchor, which I can control the pitch of that anchor depending on how far down I drag it. It really is a click and drag motion that I lay out between all of my anchor points. So I can create an object by clicking and dragging the anchor points. Once I'm done that object, then I can either right click, which will leave that object open, or I have down here a close shape option. When I click close shape, it's going to close that shape, automatically highlight it within the sequence view, and then while it's highlighted, I can also choose a stitch type, and I can choose a running stitch or a motif stitch or a steel stitch, or I can bring it back to original artwork at any time just using that little star over on the very most right hand side, or I can choose a satin stitch. When I choose a satin stitch, I click on my column satin stitch, and the first thing it does is ask me to put in inclination points. These little black circles are inclinations, and I simply click anywhere close to that object and drag across to the other side. This is where I've seen people have the most trouble because they don't click and drag to the opposite side. If I take this object here, and if I don't drag it, if I have it so it's across like this, it is not going to work. You're going to see something very funny happen on screen, and I'll show you that a little later. Once my stitch directions are in place, then I will right click, and it asks me for my start point. This is where it's going to start to sew. I right click again, and it will ask me for my stop. Okay, so I can move my stop. Actually, I didn't right click. I just simply moved it wherever I wanted it, and then I right click again and it generates the stitch. So again, I'll bring that back to the original artwork, and I'm going to choose my column stitch. I'm going to click and drag my inclination points across. Then I will right click and it changes to a green, which is start. Then I can adjust my stop point wherever I want so that I know it's going to sew from here up to here, come up and move back. If I move my stop point to the top, it'll continue to sew from here all the way over. Right click again, and it will generate those stitches. So that's how I can use the Bezier to draw an object and to assign a stitch type. And now for the final drawing tool, we have what is called the line tool. Now this is probably the simplest one to learn how to use, because if I click anywhere on the screen and I move and click, it will make a straight line. And if I go across to the other side and I start to want to make a curve, all I have to do is hold the control key down. While I hold the control key down, it will automatically curve the other side. And then if I want to create that object, I can either right click, which just creates an open-ended object, and then I can come in here and choose a running stitch around that object. Or what I can do is I can come over here and I can close that object, and now it's closed it at the top. And when I close the object, then I'm going to choose a satin stitch, and I put again my inclination points, making sure that I drag them across. That controls the direction of the stitches. Right click again, it's going to give me my start point and my end point. Right click and it will generate that object. There are two other options within the drawing tools. If you look over at the end, there's a magic wand and a magic wand for line art. Now I'll be honest with you, both of these work dependent on how clean the artwork is that you've imported and how simple it is. But if I want to just simply click on this object, it will attempt to outline that object based on the artwork that it sees. The more pixelated the image is, the less clean the artwork's going to be when the wizard tries to take over. Now the difference between that one and the magic wand for line art is this one just tries to define a line down the very center. Sometimes you can have adequate results if you're looking to do a quick job and you just want to knock something out quickly. These wizards can be helpful, but to be honest, there's no better way than actually digitizing things manually. It's the right way to do it, and in a way it's quicker than having to go in and edit it after the fact. Okay, now I'm going to show you how I would use the tools that I just showed you to actually digitize this design here. Now this is pretty simple and it should just take me a minute. Keep in mind that as I work through these exercises, part of the idea is that you will want to pause and play with me and attempt to do these things yourself. Now I'm going to go to 600%, that's my 6:1 scale. I'm going to scroll over to the artwork using my arrow keys, right and left, up or down. I'm going to choose my line tool for this, and I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to put in a point, hold the control key down, and I'm going to put a curve all the way around and go up to this area, let's say right here, and then I'm going to go over to the other side. I have taken my control key off. I did not want this top area to be curved, and now I'll hit control again and it will curve the other side. I'm coming into a straight area here, so I take the control key off and now I'm going to put it back into the other side. Now I've completed this object. I'm going to close that shape. Now that the shape is closed, it is identified as a piece of artwork. I'm going to use this as a column or a satin stitch, and I'm going to simply drag all of my inclination points around, and however you would want to see these stitches flow on your machine is how you would place the inclination stitches in those points, and you can adjust them. If you're not happy, you can move them. Once I have that done, I'm going to right click. It asks me for my start position, and I'm going to have my start position right down here, and I'm going to move my stop. There's my start right there. I'm going to move my stop over here because I want this design to stitch the way I would imagine it sewing on the machine. We've all seen designs that run smoothly on machines, and we've all seen designs that don't. So I'm going to right click again, and now it's generated those stitches. Now this area is underneath of the area that's going to go on top, which is why I stopped it there. I'm going to go back to my line tool. I'm going to put a point here, 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 and here. And if I right click right now, it will automatically close this end. You do not have to, when you're creating a satin stitch, always close the shape. When I right click, it automatically is going to take that, put in my inclination points. I'm going to put one at either end, and then I'm going to right click again. I'm going to have my start over here, and I'm going to have my start right there because my start and my stop are now closest together, and I'm going to right click and it's going to generate that shape. I'm going to go to my line tool and I'm going to put a point from here to here, and I'm going to right click. It's just a piece of artwork that's one simple line across, but I'm going to turn that into a running stitch because you have to remember we need to travel through this design. I do not want the trimmers to activate from this object here to this object here, so I'm putting in a running stitch manually. Now I'm going to put in another satin stitch just like I did before, put that one in. I'm going to right click, make it into a column stitch, 2 inclination points. I'm going to have my stop point up here and my start point down here, closest point for the design. I'll move up on my design a little bit, and then I'm going to go back to my line. I'm going to put a point from here to here so it will travel. Make sure that it is a running stitch, so I choose the run button down here at the bottom, and then I am going to go back to my line, and here I'm going to hold the control key down because I want this to be a curve. I can stop and use my arrow keys to move along this pattern. I'm going to try to be fairly accurate to the artwork, coming all the way down one side, and when I hold the control key it's going to automatically give me a nice smooth curve all the way around. When I get to this point down here at the bottom, I'm going to stop, go over a little bit, come back, and I'm going to go around the other side. I have to draw this shape exactly the way that I see it. Okay, I want to make sure that I hit both sides of that shape, and when I get back over to where I started, I'm going to make sure that I come with a curve all the way around using the control key, and then I'm going to stop right down here. I have overlapped those two areas because I want this stitch to be underneath of the satin stitch that's going to go over top. Now I'm going to close that shape, and I'm going to choose a satin stitch, and I'm going to make sure that I put my inclination points nice and smooth going around, almost the way I'd want to see those stitches sew out on the machine. That's how smoothly I want them to sew. I want it to be like the hands of a clock. You're going to have the hands of the clock go nice and smoothly around all of these curved objects, and when I get back to the beginning, I don't need a ton of inclination points. Remember, I'm working at a 600% scale. I'm going to curve that one there. I'm going to right click, and I am going to start right here. Okay, so there's my start point, and I'm going to stop, let's say, right over here. I don't like to stop at the very tip of an object, because when a design ties out, if it's not within the object, you can sometimes see that tie out. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to right click, and now I have a design that is completed. Let's bring this to our 1:1 scale, and let's fit it to screen just so you can see it real quick. I'm going to turn off my inclination points, and that design right there would be ready to sew. So using the tools within the Perla Premium is very fast and very easy, and gives you the exact control you want to create pretty much any design. One other feature I'll show you is the ability to see how your design will actually stitch out before you send it to the machine. This bar across the top, I can grab it and I can scroll across, and you'll see that the design will sew out, so to speak. It will do a simulated sewing, and it'll show you exactly how it's going to path through the design. And you can go forward and back through the design and see exactly how it's going to stitch. Or I can just click on the simulated sewing and have it stitch forward, and I can control the speed in which it sews. I can also have it go in reverse, and I can have it stop at any time that I want. Now that I've showed you the basics of the drawing tools, I'm going to show you how to apply the stitch types and the varying stitch types that are available. Now I'm going to choose my pen tool, and I'm just going to draw a line, and it really doesn't matter what the line looks like, but I've just drawn a nice curved line. I'm at 300%, and I'm going to right click and turn this line into artwork. Now once the line is represented as artwork, then I have the ability again to choose a running stitch. When I choose the running stitch in the properties, I can see that I have the choice between a single run, a double run, which is 2 passes of thread, a bean stitch, which is 3 passes. I do have the ability to use a motif, and I can choose a needle up function. Now needle up is important, because if I choose needle up, it'll automatically tell my machine to insert a trim function, and that can be handy in a design where you want to make sure that your machine does trim. I can also choose the stitch length. If I go off of 3D right now, so I'm going to take the 3D off and I'm going to put the stitch points on, you can see that the space between each stitch is set at 3 millimeters. I can take that and I can change it to 5 millimeters, and I can tell it to apply. Now it's changed the space between each of the stitches to an average of 5 millimeters apart, and I can do that for whatever stitch length I want to define. 2.5 millimeters, now the stitch length is much closer together. Shorter stitch lengths will more accurately define the shape that you've originally drawn. Now I can also take that one and I can bring it back to original artwork by hitting the artwork tool, and I can tell it to do a run motif. Now there's the motif stitch. I'll take the stitch points off. What's neat about this is there are literally hundreds of motifs to choose from. So you can choose any motif stitch that you want, choose it and apply it, and you can do pretty much anything. I can come back to my pen tool, and I'm going to let's say draw another object. So I'm going to draw whatever I want, a nice scrolling line. I'm going to right click, turn that into artwork, choose the motif stitch, and again I can change it to whatever motif that I want just at a click of a button. That's how easy it is. Now I can change the stitch length of the motif. I can change the run spacing. So if I want to make sure that I have a run spacing in millimeters that is, let's say, 1 millimeter, I'm going to click that, and it's actually changed the spacing between them. I can change the stitch length of the motifs as well. Now the other thing that I have available within that first set of tools is the satin stitch. And this will do what I like to call a fix width satin stitch. It'll take that original line, because you have to remember it's just one single line, and it is going to actually apply a satin stitch where you can control the width of the stitch. I can make it 2 millimeters, which will make it thinner. I can control the density of the stitch. I'll make it 0.8 millimeters, which is going to make it actually less dense within the design. I can control the underlay. I can have a contour, a parallel, a double zigzag. This will change all the underlay properties within the design. I can also control the pull compensation. I can have it by percentage, by absolutes. I'm going to change this to an absolute value of, let's say, 0.4 millimeters, which is going to increase the pull compensation of the design. It's going to actually sew a little bit thicker so that the pull comp on the top thread and the bottom thread, which tie themselves together, is going to cause that to actually shrink in a little bit when it does actually sew. Now I'm going to show you how to create some of the stitch types within the satin group. We're going to always choose our drawing tool. I'll just use the pen again. I'm still at 300%, and all I'm going to do is draw a satin stitch, and then when I get back to where I start, I can either close the shape or simply right click. When I close that shape, it becomes highlighted. The bottom group here of stitch types also turns on, and now I'll choose my column stitch. Now when I put my inclination points in, and you'll always know the inclinations because of that little black circle right near your crosshair, I'm going to make sure again that I make it click and drag to the opposite side of the object. I never want to have it just start at one side and go straight across on the same side. That will create a very strange effect when it goes to generate the stitches. So they always need to cross over. Also remember that these inclination points, they determine the stitch angles in which it's going to sew. If your inclination points come in very sharply towards the inside of an object, then when I right click, choose my start and my stop position, and then I right click again, what's going to happen is it's going to actually generate the stitches, and you can see this grouping right here where I have a whole bunch of stitches that have come in very sharply on that inside edge. That is because my inclination points needed to be a little smoother around the edges. When I generate that, it has actually turned it into a nice smooth curve. So it's very important that you remember your inclination points need to be laid down smoothly and always from one side to the other. Now if I ever want to change the color of my design, I can come here and click on the colors itself. There is the select thread chart, and I can choose from any of the thread charts that are available, and simply, while it is highlighted, by clicking any of the colors, I can change the color of thread that I'm using. So if I wanted to do my next object, I'll choose my pen tool again, and again I'll just create another very simple little satin stitch outline. I'm going to close that shape. This time I'm going to choose my jagged edge column, which is the next one over. It goes through the exact same process where I'm dragging my inclination points from one side all the way across to the other. I'm going to right click, put my start position, put my end position, right click again, and it's going to generate those stitches. But now can you see how it's jagged all around the edges? I can change that color to whatever color I want, and when I go over to my properties, because it is highlighted, it is a satin stitch, I do have the density there, I can go in and control the underlay. I have my jagged edge under my column, and now it says both, and it has a jagged value of 2 millimeters. That means that it's going to throw that 2 millimeters across, and if I increase it to 4 millimeters, hit apply, you're going to see that it is now much more jagged on both sides. I can also ask it to jagged on just the first or the second side, which means that I'm going to have a nice smooth edge across here, but it's going to be jagged on the first side of the column, or I can flip that over to the second side and it will mirror over and just do that other side as well. I can also control the contour, and by clicking contour it will automatically change that to a contour stitch. I can control the density of the contour by changing that from 1 to 2, and it is going to thicken it up a little bit. All kinds of useful tools within your properties. Now we're going to use the spiral column. I'm going to use the same pen tool. I'm just going to very quickly draw a very simple satin stitch. I'm going to close the shape. I'm going to choose the spiral column stitch, put my inclination points across, right click to choose my start and my stop position, and then when I right click again I have my spiral stitch in place. Now here I can control the spiral stitch and I can control the density of it, so I'm going to change that from 4 millimeters to, let's say, 2 millimeters, and you can see how it gives me a pretty interesting effect as it spirals around the column. So playing with the density is really the key to using the spiral stitch properly and to getting your desired effect. Now keep in mind again, I can change the color of any of these objects just by clicking across the bottom color bar, and I can change to any of my thread colors that I desire and just choose that color at my convenience. I'm going to turn that object back to the original artwork. I'm going to change the color so it's a little brighter on my screen, and I'm going to choose the gradient column. I'm going to put my inclination points on. Remember, anytime you are working within your column options, it's always the same repetitive steps: inclination, start point, stop point, and then right click and it will generate those stitches. And here I have a gradients, which is going from a denser area up here, and then it gradiates down to looser density at the bottom. Now you can see that I do have my underlay turned on, so if I turn off my contour underlay, all of those stitches underneath will disappear and it'll actually give me a cleaner looking gradients within that object. I do also on the properties have a little tab marked gradients, and it will allow me to control the density of the gradients as well as the type of gradients, whether it is linear increasing or decreasing, or whether it is convex or concave. At the click of a button I can change it so that it will change the type of gradation that's created within that object. Now we're going to look at our fancy column that is going to use a fancy fill within a column stitch. So I'm going to draw the column like I normally would. I'll use a line tool and I can put my control key down to create a curve, and I'll probably try to use this on a thicker stitch. I'm not going to use it on a 2 or 3 millimeter stitch. I'll try to make sure it's on a little bit of a thicker stitch. I'll close that shape, and then when I click on the fancy column and I put my inclination points, it will turn the penetrations towards the inclination points, even though the fancy pattern fill is going to be present within the design. So when I right click, I put my start position down, stop position, right click again, or enter, and it's going to create that pattern fill. When I change the pattern fill, it will change the pattern, but it is going to also change the direction of the inclination points with that pattern as well. Now the next stitch I'm going to show you is one that's really a lot of fun. It's actually called the contour column stitch, and I like using it creatively when I'm doing stuff like grass or seaweed or anything like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my points down, again hitting the control key, and I'll just create some seaweed. Let's call it seaweed anyways, and we're going to create it so that it's going something like this. So there we have a nice sort of a strange shape, and we're going to close that shape, and then we're going to choose our contour column, and I'm going to again drag my inclination points across that column stitch, bring it right up to the top there. I'm going to choose my start position, and I'll choose my stop position so it starts and stops on one side and then the other, and then I'm going to right click, and you can see how it's loosened up the density towards the center, but it has adjusted for the density up in the tightest areas as well. So if you look at this sort of in a 3D effect, we actually have something that looks very sort of blended and very realistic looking. You can also control the density. I'm going to change that from, let's say, 0.4 millimeters to 0.8 millimeters, apply it. It's going to loosen up the density a little bit, and I can also choose a different stitch type. So I'm going to, let's say, use random and press apply, and it will give me a totally different effect. So that's part of the fun of the program, is trying all of the different settings within your properties and seeing what works good and looks good. Now this is a fun one as well. This is called a radial column, and we could draw a perfect circle if we wanted, but if you've ever tried it before, drawing a perfect circle isn't always easy. So there are shapes within the Perla Premium software. We have a square, circle, triangle, pentagon, hexagon, and a whole bunch of custom shapes that are already pre-done and ready for you to play with. So what I'm going to do is I am going to close that up. I'm going to click on my custom shapes, choose the ellipse or the circle, and I'm just going to make a perfect circle. Keep in mind, if you hold the control key down, it will create a perfect circle. If you do not have the control key held down, it will allow you to create whatever type of ellipse you want. So there is my ellipse. I'm going to make it a nice bright color because we are going to make this the center of a flower, let's say. And then I'm going to choose my radial column stitch. And what you'll see is it does a beautiful radial column stitch, which I can adjust the stitch length and I can adjust the density. If I want to loosen this up, I'm just going to make this 3 or 4 millimeters and apply it, and the density is going to start to stagger on that. Sometimes using this in a lower density with a fill underneath of it will give you a visual effect without the stitches getting too hard. So again, playing with your software and playing with the settings, that's really the fun part, because you can adjust things and make them, run well and look good on your machine. Okay, now we've saved the best till last. I'm going to show you the auto column stitch, and I'm going to use the line tool. I'm not going to use the pen tool, and the reason why is I know from past experience it just does not work as well. Now the auto branching is exactly what it sounds like. If you have a tree, you have branches, and branches seem to come off the main part of the tree. So what we're going to do is we are going to create all kinds of little branches here, and instead of having to think this out and digitize every branch so that it's going to be a whole bunch of different objects, I'm simply doing all of the outlines, finishing the area the way I want, closing the shape. I'm going to change it to a darker brown color, and then I'm going to hit that auto column or auto branching tool, and it will logically go and do all of the pieces so that they sew out, and it looks pretty accurate. I mean, for doing a artistic merit fast fun design, you can't beat that speed. So far we've showed you all of the running stitch tools and all of the satin or column stitch tools, and now we're going to move on to all of the fill stitch tools. And really that about has it covered. In any software program we have a running stitch, a satin stitch, and a fill stitch. Now I'm going to show you how to create a fill and how to create the fill with holes. And this is where you're going to be amazed, because the Perla software just does this incredibly fast and simple. We're going to choose the line tool again, doesn't matter which one, but we'll choose the line tool, and I'm just going to create an object, doesn't matter what shape it is, and I can have curves or I can have straights in it. And then when I am about to finish, if I were to either right click or close my shape right now, it would fill it in with a fill stitch. So let's do that. We're going to right click, I'm going to close that shape, I'm going to tell it to be a fill stitch, a standard fill, and it has filled it in with a standard fill. Now you can go into your properties, it will automatically give you the contour underlay, you can do a parallel underlay, you can do a perpendicular or full lattice underlay depending on how much underlay. All of those will be predefined in the recipe that you chose at the very beginning. So if you've chosen the recipe jeans or canvas or whatever it is, it'll all automatically be there. So if I want to change that fill type, I can take it from a smooth to a cornrow 2, click on it, it's going to change that. If I want it to have a very smooth effect, I'll change it to a smooth fill. If I want it to have a kind of a random effect, I can change it to a random fill. So all of that is at a click of a button. You can change the density of that fill, so if you want to do some blending of fills, you can change it to 0.8 and it'll loosen up that fill a little bit, so that you'll almost be able to see the fabric underneath show through. A lot of times we want to adjust those properties within our stitches. When we turn the 3D off, you can really get a good idea of how the density has changed from more density to less. Okay, so that is how you create a regular fill pattern or regular shape. But what about if we want to put holes? So we're going to go back, we're going to delete that one that we just did, and let's go to our let's say pen tool, and we're just going to draw any random shape that we want. And now I want to add a hole. So the easiest way to add a hole is on your keyboard you hit the H key, which is the hotkey for hole, and then it allows you to draw whatever hole you want in the design. If you want one more hole, hit the H key again. If you want another hole, hit the H key again. As many holes as you want to put into that design, hit that H key and it'll allow you to do the next hole. But if you're done doing holes, do not hit the H key. At that point, what you want to do is you want to right click and you're going to choose your standard fill, and it's going to then do your fill, but it's going to leave those areas that you carved out totally open, and it's going to give you, that's pretty much perfect. You can't get any better than that. So it's very, very easy to create a fill shape and a fill shape inserting the holes in the design. It's just the H key, which is the hotkey for inserting a hole in a fill shape. Let's take a look at some of our other fun fills. We're going to choose a custom shape, and we're going to scroll down and choose a star. Star is going to come on the screen. If you want to look at the size of the star, this is where you would transform the height and the width. You can do it by percentage, but let's make this, let's say, a 3-inch star. So we want to make sure that we do 3 inches on both sides, and we're going to hit apply. Now there's our star. Now I'm going to tell it to make it a different color because we want to have a gold star, and I'm going to tell it that I want to have a fancy fill. Now the fancy fill came in, and if I turn the 3D on, you're going to see that we have that fill pattern. Now the beauty of Perla is there are hundreds of fills for you to choose from. So just have fun, knock yourself out. You can try all the different fills. They'll all sew out with all the different shapes, and you can choose any fill pattern you want. You can do the density differently so that you can adjust density. Sometimes the fancy fills will be a little bit more stitch intensive because they have to put a penetration everywhere to define that shape that it's trying to create. Now I also have the ability to create a motif fill. The motif fills, again, click of a button, I have all of my motifs to play with, and you can again see just hundreds of them. Choose any motif that you'd like. Sometimes seeing the stitch count of the motif, which the stitch count is always up at the top here. It says that this design right now has 3,560 stitches. It's one color, it's 3 by 3 inches, and if I look at that and I change this to a different motif fill, it changed to 3,202 stitches. Now the one thing that you want to consider when doing a motif fill is it usually always looks better with a border around the edge because there's a lot of kind of unfinished areas there. Now this is where it gets to be really fun. We have a shape. The shape is over here in our sequence view, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy. I'm going to right click again and I'm going to paste. Now I have two of the same fills. It would literally sew both fills on top of each other. Now if I choose the second fill, I can take that fill and I can make that into a satin stitch. Now I have a satin stitch around the edge of that. I can change it into a motif stitch. I could make it a slightly different color, and you can see how fast and easy it is to actually create a border around something just at the click of a button. I can even change it to a running stitch and it will perfectly outline that area. Turn it on to 3D and you'll see that it actually creates a nice clean effect. Using the gradient tool is also very easy. We're just going to go to a 300% screen, and I'm going to choose my custom shapes, scroll down, choose a Christmas tree, and you can resize that Christmas tree in your properties under transform, or if you just want to do it by eye, you can make it a little bigger, a little smaller. I can grab any of the handles, I can change the overall shape on it, and position it anywhere that I want on the screen. Now that I have the shape done, I'm going to choose, let's say, a green color, and all I have to do with one click of a button is click on the gradient fill. Now you'll notice that there's some traveling stitches underneath the gradient fill, and those can, be a little unsightly. You don't want to see those stitches underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my start and stops. I'm going to go right below my select button is my shape tool, and it actually allows me to reshape the design. I can make that tree a little bit higher at the top if I want. I can adjust if I want to the actual direction of the stitches, okay? Or I can come in here and I can also change the start and the stop of the design. By grabbing the little red circle, I can have it stop at the bottom, and grabbing the green, it'll start at the top. So by doing that and pressing the enter button, now I have no traveling stitches underneath. Now I can also come over here to the sequence, and I can do the same thing I did before. I can copy, I can paste, and now I'm going to have two trees, two fills. I'm going to take that second one, choose a run motif, have it go around the outside, make it a little bit darker, and I now have a beautiful gradient fill underneath of a motif outline, and it took me a matter of seconds. Okay, now I can also come in here to my fill stitch, and I can change that from a one color gradient to a two color blend, and that's going to blend two colors together. Okay, I can adjust my start and stops there as well. I can also do a wave fill. The wave fill will actually, depending on the density, and let me go in here and I'm going to adjust the density of that wave so that we have, let's say, a 3mm density. You're going to see that wave is just beautiful. And if I reshape that wave, you're going to see that I can control the pitch of the wave with Beziers that are automatically in there. By pressing enter, it's changed the entire look of that design. So it's just really, really fun, cool stuff. And if that's not enough, you can also come in here and you can do a wave gradient fill, which is going to give you, tighter density at the bottom and looser at top. Or I can do a two color blend wave gradient fill, which is, it looks spectacular. So I mean, there's no limitations with this software. You can just have fun, be creative, and do things that you never dreamed possible without having these tools available. Now we're going to move on to some of the novelty stitch effects. The first one I'm going to show you is the embossing tool. Now to use this tool, I want to emboss something on top of a fill stitch or satin stitch. So I'm going to just choose a rectangle, and I'm going to take that rectangle and apply one of the fill patterns. And I'll just use a smooth fill pattern. I'm going to change the color of it so that we can see it nice and bright on the screen. Now that I have that fill, I'm going to select my pen tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to very easily write my name on top of this fill. So I'll just write John, and then I'm going to select my first name, and then I'll continue on and I will write my last name, and I'll write the name Deer. Now that I have both of my names, I'm going to go over to my sequence view, hit the control key so that both of them are highlighted, and then right down here I'm going to hit the tool that's called embossing. Now when I emboss, you're going to see on screen, now it has taken and embossed a stitch everywhere where I spelt my name. Now this is a really cool tool because you can emboss whatever you want. It can be, names or objects, whatever you want on top of fill patterns, as easy as drawing over top of them and hitting that one magical button. The automatic applique tool is another great tool to have fun with. We're going to choose one of our custom shapes, and I'm going to bring in a bird, and just remember you can always go to your properties and transform that to any size that you want. Now another thing that you can do, because this is a piece of artwork, this was digitized by somebody, you can always come up to your shape tool which is right underneath of your select, and I can shape this design. Any of the existing nodes that are on this design, I can simply grab it, and I could make this one a little bit bigger and bring this one down a little bit. So if I want to make the beak of that bird a little more pronounced, I can do that. If I think that his tail is too small, I can exaggerate the tail. I can grab any of these handles and I can reshape the tail a little bit. I can grab this handle here and I can shape the arc going to the inside. So you can come in here and you can customize any shape to your desire. Now that I have that shape exactly the way I want it, all I'm going to do is make sure that it is selected, and I'm going to choose my auto applique. And what's going to happen is it's going to automatically generate an applique which consists of an outline stitch and then a tack down stitch, and then your finishing stitch is at the very end, and the applique is done. That's ready to sew out on your machine. Now let's do something else. Let's grab another shape. I'm just going to grab an ellipse, and I'm going to take this one and I'm going to just kind of make it, let's say like this, because I want to add a wing onto this bird. Okay, now I'm going to take that wing and I'm just going to position it wherever I want on the design. And if I look at that wing, well, it's kind of nice that it's arced at the top, but I think I want it to be pointed at the bottom. So I'm going to go to my reshape, and I'm going to go on to this point right here, and when I click on it and when I right click, I can actually change it from a smooth to a cusp to a line, symmetrical. So if I change that one point to a line, it's going to give me a piece that I can actually have that's a little more like a wing shape. I can also come anywhere on this design, and if I want to add a point here, I can right click and say add point. And then that point can be moved so that I can change the shape of that one piece. Click on it again. I can now change the anchor point so that I can adjust the overall shape of that. And once I'm happy with the desired result, then I can just grab that same piece and I'm going to do another applique. And now I have an applique for that section of the design. Now the appliques are really fun because you can change them on the fly. I can grab any one of these pieces and I can change that from a satin stitch to a blanket stitch, and it's going to automatically change the blanket to a blanket stitch. If I see an area that I'm not exactly happy with, like right here, then all I have to do is reshape that one area, and let's give it a slightly different shape and see what happens when I regenerate. Move those points, hit enter, and now it's fixed that little problem. There's always solutions if it generates stitches automatically. By moving the nodes just a little bit, it'll usually fix those problems right away. I can also take this and change it from a satin stitch, and let's do a motif stitch instead. I'm going to apply that motif stitch, and again, any of the motifs that are available within the software can just as quickly be turned into an applique. So if we look at the sewing order, we have our first applique with our outline stitch, then we have our tack down stitch, then we have our blanket stitch, then we have our outline and tack down for the wing, and then finally it's doing a beautiful little motif around the edge. Well, this bird looks great, but I think there's one more thing we need to do. Let's take a little circle and let's just add an eye, and we'll put the eye right there, and we're going to make it up here a little bit, exactly where we want it. And then let's just choose our radial column stitch. This is one of the satin stitch types that I showed you before. It's a column stitch. And now we have our bird. He's done. Color change after each little piece, and he's ready to fly. Now let's take a look at the auto stipple stitch as well as the cross stitch. We're going to come back into our custom shapes. I'll choose one of my shapes and let's do a Christmas tree. So we're going to bring that tree in. Again, remember you can transform this into whatever size or shape you want simply by changing the height or the width, or by grabbing the actual handles to change the shape itself. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn it into a light green color because Christmas trees are usually green, and I'm just going to hit this auto stipple button. Now this will give me a stipple effect, and it really didn't fill up the shape exactly the way I wanted. It's a nice loose stipple, so I'm going to go over to the properties and let's change that from a 3mm density to a 2mm density. Now, it's automatically filled it in and now it's retaining a little more of the shape. The more density I give it, the closer to the edges it's going to come. So I'm pretty happy with that. And the reason why is I'm going to do a little trick here. We're going to take that object and I'm going to take the auto stipple and we are going to right click and we're going to copy it and we are going to paste it. So I have two auto stipples, the first one and the second one. Well, the second one, let's grab that and let's do a satin column around there. So we're doing an automatic satin column and we'll make that color a little bit darker so there's some contrast between the inside of the tree. Now, looking at it, I see a little bit of a problem, and the problem is right here. I have some gapping. Now, anytime I see gapping, you have to remember these are automatic tools, and sometimes strange things will happen, but there's always a solution. So I'm going to highlight the steel, and I'm going to reshape it, and if I look, my exit point is right on that corner, and that's why we have that problem. So simply by moving this along the line, along the artwork, I'm going to move it up a little bit and I'm going to press enter, and now we have fixed that problem. It's no longer there. Okay, so I can be happy with that design, or I can grab the stipple and let's turn that into a cross stitch. So now I have an auto cross stitch pattern, and you can adjust the size of the cross stitch as well. I can take the steel and I can change that to a motif, and I can change it to any one of my motifs that I want, and it's going to automatically give me a border around the outside of that line. Obviously some will be friendlier than others, but that's the whole point. You have just tons of possibilities and you can be as creative as you want because all these can be changed as quickly as clicking a button. Now that I've shown you the drawing tools and the stitch types that are available, we're going to just do something really fun. Now, you might want to watch through this the first time and then you can follow along and recreate what I'm doing, but we're going to make a quilt square. And I know enough about quilting that I start out with a square. It's got to be a perfect square. I don't want it to be a rectangle, so I'm going to hit the control key and that's going to give me a perfect square. Then I'm going to transform this and make it whatever size I want, and we're going to make a 6-inch quilt square. So I will apply it, and then I'm going to grab this center little icon and I'll move it so it's centered right onto my grid. Now I'm going to take another object and I'll just take one of my custom shapes, and we're going to take this kitty cat here and I'm going to resize the kitty cat, make him a little bit smaller, and I will place him centered into the design. I'm going to move him down just a little bit because I'm going to modify this cat. I'm going to go to my shape tool and I'm going to give this cat larger ears. He's going to have a little bit of attitude. We're going to make larger ears on him. And speaking of attitude, I'm also going to add a couple of points here. Let's add a point there, and we'll add a point right over here. So I've added 2 points, and I'm going to take this center point and let's drag it down because I think I want a cool cat. So we're going to give him a little goatee, and I'll turn that into a line. Now I have a cool cat. Now on my artwork over in my sequence view, I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste. So now I have 2 cats in 1 square. Now this is the fun part because we are going to create a quilt block, and I want to make sure that I have stippling within this quilt block so the batting is going to be pressed down. So I'm going to grab that square and I'm going to hit the control button and grab the first cat, and then while they're both highlighted I'm going to right click and I'm going to tell them to combine. So now I have a cat within the square and I have a cat all by himself. Now while those two are combined, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hit the stipple, the auto stipple, and I'm going to create a stipple stitch around the outside, and let's give it a little more density. I'll go to 2 millimeters and I will apply that, and now I have a stipple in there that's going to bat down that batting, and it's going to look pretty cool. Okay, now we're ready for our next step. Now we're going to grab the second cat, which is still labeled as artwork, and we're going to turn it into an automatic applique. Now you notice the applique is green, and I really don't want a green cat, so I'm going to click onto a light brown color, and it's asking me which color I'd like to be light brown. I'm going to choose color number 3 because that's the visual satin stitch within the applique. So now I have an applique on top of a stipple stitch that has crushed down the batting, so this is really going to look dimensional. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of life, and we're going to give the animal some life by adding eyes. So let's take our ellipse tool and we are going to create one eye. There's an eye. But cat's eyes usually aren't perfectly oval, so I'm going to reshape that. I'm going to right click right over top of the node that I want to reshape, and I'm going to make it a line, and then I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing, make that one a line, and then I'll go back to my select and I'm going to turn it on an angle so it looks like a cat's eyes would, and I'll place it exactly where I want it. Now that I have the first eye done, I'm going to go over to my sequence view, I'm going to right click, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it, and now I have two eyes that are labeled as artwork. Now I want to grab both those eyes, so I'm going to grab the first one, push down the control button, grab the second one, they're both highlighted. I'm going to copy this group as well, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste again, and now I have four eyes. The last two that I just copied and pasted are still highlighted, so let's flip those horizontally. And when I flip them horizontally, now I can move them in place and put them on the other side. And I'm going to also take it and rotate it a little bit because the design is kind of, the cat is, sitting on a little bit of an angle. His face isn't perfectly straight. So now I have those eyes pretty much exactly where I want them. Now let's create the center of his eyes. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to take that ellipse tool and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it a little bit. We'll make an eye that looks something like that. I'm going to reshape this one as well. I'm going to take the top piece and the node and I'm going to turn it into a line. I'm going to take the bottom piece, I'm going to turn that one into a line. I'm going to select it so that I can rotate the design again, and I'm just rotating it ever so slightly, and then I'm going to put it into place something like that. Okay, now let's take that piece, we're going to copy it and we're going to paste it. Well, it's highlighted. I now have two of the centers of the eyes, the pupils, and I'm going to take that one and I'm going to flip it horizontally as well, and I'm going to move it over into the other eye, knowing that I do need to rotate it a little bit just because I rotated the first piece, and we'll just slip that one right in place as well, and there we go. That looks pretty good. Okay, now here's where the fun begins, because we're going to take these objects, and I'm going to take the first eye here and I'm going to grab it and I'm going to tell it to be white, and I'm going to tell it to be a fill stitch. So now we have white in behind the fill stitch. Now I'm going to take the second eye, the first piece of artwork in the second eye, and I'm going to do a white color with a fill stitch as well. And now I have two white fill stitches. Now the other piece of artwork, I'll grab that one. I'm going to tell it to be a running stitch, but we'll make it a bean stitch, which is 3 passes of thread, so it's going to be a little bit thicker. We'll go down to the second piece on the other side, do the exact same thing. We'll choose a running stitch, we'll come over to the properties, make it a bean stitch, apply it, and then we'll go to the centers of the eyes. This time I'm going to choose a column stitch. It's going to ask for one inclination point, right click, ask me to do a start and stop position, press enter, it's going to generate the stitches. Click the other eye, do the exact same thing. I'm going to put the inclination point, making sure it goes all the way across. Right click, do the start and stop position, enter, and now I have my eyes completed. Now we have a little bit of resequencing to do. We've turned all of those objects in the eyes into embroidery stitches, but if you look here, I have a white eye, then I have a brown outline, and then I have another white eye, and then it goes back to brown. That really is an unnecessary color change, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to take that second color of white and I'm going to move it up one in the sewing order, and now all the white is going to sew together. Now I have the one eye and the other eye, and then I have the centers. Well, I might want to do the same thing. I might want to, in this last color, take that run stitch and move it down one in the sewing order so that it's going to do one eye and then go over and complete the other eye with all of those details within the eyes. Now we're going to give this cat a nose. So we're going to go back to our custom shapes, grab the little triangle. We'll just make this nose whatever size we want. I'm going to rotate it around and place it underneath and move it into position. Now when I have the nose sort of in position, then I'm going to go to my reshaping and I'm going to click on the node, turn it into a smoothed area, click onto the other side, smooth it out as well. Maybe I'll even put a extra node in the top here. I'm going to add a point and I'll pull this one down a little bit, and then I can pull this node up a little bit so that I have a nose that I think Kind of looks good. Okay, now I'm going to click onto my pen tool and I'm just going to draw this by freehand. So I'm going to take my pen tool and I'll just grab a happy little face that goes something like that, and then I am going to select that as well. So there I have the little face under there. I can move it if I want to get it just perfectly underneath of there, and I'm going to tell that one that I want it to be a running stitch, and let's make it a bean stitch because that's the same stitch type that I used around the eyes. And then let's grab the nose and we will take that nose and we will turn it into a fill stitch, and I want it to be a smooth fill stitch, but I really want to change the direction of those stitches. So I'm going to go to my reshape, and you can see the little black handle is the handles for the inclination points, which are the stitch directions. So by moving those stitch directions up and down, I'm going to change the actual shape. I can also move the start and stop position of this design so that it's going to start here and stop here. And then I'm going to hit the enter button and you'll see that it's regenerated the stitches to the angle that I want. Now I can see a little bit of a line there. A lot of times when I generate stitches, and if I see anything happen when it regenerates by moving those nodes, it pretty much automatically fixes those problems, and there we are pretty much done. Before I save any design in my machine, I always like to take a look at the sequence view because that really is the order in which it sews. And just looking at this, that last color that I did, that last piece, which is the run stitch for the mouth, to me it would make more sense for that to be underneath of the fill. So I'm going to grab that and I'm going to move it up in the sewing order, and then I'm going to grab the entire last grouping of colors. I'm starting up here and I'm going to go down to the bottom, hold the shift key, and I'm going to click on the last color, and everything within that color is now highlighted. And then I'm going to grab the optimize entry exit points. This is going to automatically path all of those pieces so that it's going to sew more logically, and that's a great automatic function. Now I'm going to grab the stipple and I'll just change that to a color which I think is going to look kind of pretty, and that is awesome. We have a great design here which is a combination of stipples with appliques. We did all of the features inside the CAD, and this just took us a matter of minutes to accomplish. Perla Premium does have all the bells and whistles that you'd look for in a full-featured digitizing program. It also has quick picks. Now, quick picks are pre-digitized shapes that are built in within the program. All you have to do is scroll across, choose the shape that you're interested in, and then simply click on the screen. Now, you can resize that by selecting it and resize the design however you see fit. Now, once it's highlighted, then I also have these really cool tools down here. This is called a power paste, and what it allows me to do is it allows me to take that one quick pick or any design, and I can very quickly just lay out a collage of designs as I want. So if I want to do stars in the sky, I can very quickly just digitize one object and place as many of them in random order as I wish. So that's a really cool feature that makes the whole digitizing process much easier with only digitizing one simple object. There are also templates that are set up within the program. So I can click on the design that I want to create within the template, go over to the template icon, and it will automatically give me preset templates for various collar types. So I just choose the template that I want, hit the apply button, and press OK, and it will automatically give me a template set up for that collar. Circle templates are also a fast, fun way to create instant layouts. I can go to my circle template, I can adjust the dimensions of the circle, I can adjust how many of the stars I want in that circle, and I can also adjust the size of the stars that are going to be inside. After I'm happy with the layout, or if I want to offset the angles, I can control the rotation. If there's multiple colors, I can even do an automatic color sort. Once I hit apply and OK, it'll automatically generate a beautiful circle template for that one single design. And yes, as you would expect, Perla Premium does have all of the auto digitizing wizards. We have auto cross stitch, auto photo stitch, auto artwork, and auto digitizing. Now, I have to be honest with you, I've never been a big fan of auto digitizing. Generally, the quality of the design depends on the quality of the artwork, but for doing very, very fast, quick projects, you can have success that you can be happy with. Just keep in mind that a lot of times you will definitely need to edit that design afterwards and change some of the stitch directions and maybe some of the density and how the colors will overlap each other. But you can get fairly nice results as you can see here. One of the most powerful features of Perla Premium is the lettering that's built into the software. All of these custom fonts were digitized professionally and you'll get great results. Now anytime you see a little arrow underneath of an icon, that means that there's other options available. I have regular text, text within a circle, monograms, and vertical text. As soon as I click on the desired type that I want, I click on the screen and the text will appear on the screen. Now you can go over and you can write in whatever letters you want. You can also choose the font type. Now if you hover over the font type, it will always show you the characters that are available. Plus if you click on the little question mark, a screen will pop up and it'll show you the sizes and the minimum and the maximums that are friendly for this font. Not all fonts are friendly in every single size. Now if you want to get a preview, I can also click over here, choose any of these fonts and get a preview, and then I can scroll down with my arrow keys and I can see the fonts sort of appear. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose the font that I want to use, and once I have that font chosen, I am going to type in the text that I want. I'll type in my name and then I'm going to hit the apply. Once I hit apply, the font will appear on the screen. Now I'm going to bring this in to fit to screen, and then we're going to show you how you can modify and how you can adjust this font to however you want. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make this a little bit smaller just so that we can see all of the areas on the screen. You'll notice that there's a black wireframe box around the outside, and then there's various points that are in black, squares, circles, and little objects that look like arrows and diamonds. And I suggest you play with all these because they allow you to adjust the text in various ways. You can create the text so that you have a curve. If you ever lose your wireframe, just click on the design. I can sort of have the design arc. I can make this part of the design bigger on one side. I can adjust the whole design out to the right or the left hand side, and I can play with pretty much every attribute of this design as I desire. So I can also control the angle in which it's going to sew. So that's pretty cool. Now the other thing that I have are these little blue triangles, and what they allow me to do is to control the kerning of the design. So I can actually control the kerning of any of these areas. So if there is a point in the design that just seems like the space or the distance is too far apart, I can join them so that they will almost be closest point. I can also grab any of these little orange squares, and by grabbing those it will just sort of single out that one letter, and I'll have a wireframe around it with little green areas now. And now I could take that one letter and I can make the J bigger. I can turn it on a slight angle and modify it exactly how I want so that I can customize every single letter in my design. I can make it bigger or smaller and adjust it so that it really is customized exactly to my needs. Now when I'm done, I notice that the spacing has changed between the D and the E. I'm going to click anywhere on the black wireframe and you'll notice that all of your nodes have reappeared, and then I can position that design so that I do have adequate spacing between those letters. So the best way to get used to playing with your fonts is to just dive in there and see what all of those little circles, squares, different colors do. Once you have the hang of it, it's very, very quick, and you can modify any font for any design that you want. Now that we've covered a majority of the features found in the Perla Premium software, we're going to digitize the design from beginning to end so that you see the exact steps that we're going to take from bringing in the artwork all the way through to saving the design out to the machine. Now we're going to use our backdrop tool, and we're going to use our images that are preloaded within your software, and I'm going to choose a simple design. Let's just grab this musical note and we'll place it on the screen. Now keep in mind, if you want to resize this design, this is the time that you do it, and I'm going to resize this design to 3 inches in height, and we will then press the apply. Now I've resized the design. Also, it is solid black, and I don't like digitizing on a solid black image. I'm going to lighten that up a little bit so that I'll be able to see all of my outlines as I create my artwork. So I've lightened up my design. Now the next thing I want to do, now that I have the design lightened and the size that I want, is I'm going to go to my program preferences, and I'm going to have a PES machine format that is based on which machine brand you currently have, and I'm going to use the jeans recipe. I like the jeans recipe. It has a nice density, and it puts the underlay pretty much exactly where I like to have it placed, and I'm going to press OK. Now let's start digitizing. I'm going to choose my drawing tool, and I'm going to digitize this design the way I like to see it. So that means that this area here in the center, that single bar that's going across, is underneath of the other object. So I'm going to do that piece first, and all I'm going to do is take my line tool, and I'm going to put a point right here, a point over here, a point over here, and a point over here. So I've defined that. Now, I could close the shape if I want to, or I could just press the right click button and it will highlight that shape, and all of my stitch types have now become highlighted along the bottom as well. I'm going to choose the column stitch, and it's going to ask me for my inclination points. That's my stitch direction again. I have to make sure I drag those from one side all the way across to the other. Never have them on the same line. You will have bad things happen. Now here I'm going to choose my or click my right click, and now I can adjust my start and my stop points. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to stop there, and then I am going to press enter, and it's generated those stitches. Now I'm ready to do my next piece. I'm going to again choose my line, and I'm going to start right down here, and I'm going to turn my control on because this is a curve. I'm going to take my control off and go straight, straight, and then go straight into this. Okay? If you ever see a curve come in place, here if I put a curve in place right now, if I hold the control key down, it would curve that entire area like we saw there. So I don't want to see that, so I have to make sure I go straight, straight, and then I can curve. Okay? If you don't have that done properly, then you're going to have some bad things happen again. So straight, curve, curve with the control key, straight, straight, come straight to here, come straight over to here, come down to this side, one more straight, and then I can go back to curves. And I'm going to cut this off short on that side as well. Now there I have outlined that entire design. I can again right click at this point, or I can close the shape. If I close the shape, it will automatically highlight it, and now it's ready to put in my satin stitch. I'm going to choose my column satin stitch. Again, inclination points. I usually try to drag an inclination point close to either side of my endpoints on either side, and then I can start to put my inclination points in, and I want to make sure that I put these inclination points in so that they will kind of turn in a front. I don't want to really have an inclination point coming in hard like this, because there's not enough space on the inside to turn that stitch, so I got to make sure that I have some space between those two so the software knows to turn those stitches. It's going to turn between here and between here, and I'm coming straight into this corner, straight into this corner, and then I'll want to make sure that I put in a couple of inclination points to make that turn. Again, I don't want to come too sharp into the turn, and I've put my inclination points in. I'm going to right click. It's asking me for my start position. I want to have my start position right here, because that's where I stopped. Wherever you stopped on the previous column is where you want to start on the next one. And then I press my enter button. I'm going to move this a little bit off of the end of the design. The software will automatically tie out, and I don't like seeing tie out stitches at the very end of my design, so I'm going to move it in a little bit, and there I have that design completed. I can turn the 3D off. You will see that there's underlay traveling along the edge there. It looks nice and clean, and that design is pretty much ready to sew. Now, a couple other quick little things I'd like to show you, and this is more to do with editing. Now here I have my selection tool. My selection tool allows me to select the object that I want to edit. I can click over on the sequence view and select the objects as well. Okay. Now here, if I want to reshape, I have my reshaping tool, and now I can reshape all of my points. I can reshape the outside, sort of artwork points. I can also reshape my inclination points, and I can move my start and stop positions. But if you're ever in a design and you see that there's just way too many points, it's too confusing, then what I can do is I can right click and I can say edit all. That'll show all my inclination, my art, art points, and my start and stop. Or if I just want to edit my inclination points, I can just hit inclinations. And now those will be the only points that are available for me to actually move. And if I move this one here and I press enter, you'll see that the direction of the stitches will actually change. Okay, so I can go in and change just my inclination points. Okay, I can add inclination points from that tab as well. Okay, and that allows you to have more versatility in changing the design. Now, there is also the ability to edit single stitches in a design as well. I do have my stitch tool here, and if I click on the stitch tool, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and again, there is a magnifying glass. I can pan, I can, call for a ruler. These are all useful tools for measuring stitch lengths and moving quickly around a design. But if I zoom into a corner and I want to move a few stitches, then I just will click onto my stitch edit, and when I hover over it, I can move individual stitches. So I can move one stitch at a time on this design. Or I also have a lasso tool, where this is a lasso tool for stitches. So I can grab that lasso tool and I can grab a group of stitches, and then I can hover over it and move all of those stitches at one time, and that'll allow me to move the group of stitches, or then I can go back and do them individually for the next group. So that gives you even more versatility when you are editing a design. Now I've brought the design back into a full screen, and I undid all of those stitch editing points that I created. And what I want to do now is I want to save this embroidery file. Now there's a couple of different ways to do it. I can press save, and it's going to save as a EFP. Now here's the thing, Perla does save into all types of different formats based on the machine that you have, so that's not the issue. But when you are working on a custom design, I always suggest that you save it as a Perla file, which is an EFP extension. Now the reason why you'll want to do that is because when you save as an EFP extension, then the design has all of its original points, all of the artwork that you created, every single node, every single point that you put in, the density, the underlay, the pull compensation will always be there for you to change afterwards. If you save the file and you save it as a extension, let's say PES, which is an embroidery extension, then it really becomes expanded data. And that means that if I called it back into my Perla software, I would not be able to edit it as easily as I would with the Perla file. So if you're going to save to a machine, obviously PES is the way you have to do it, because a machine will not read a Perla file. The only software that will read that is Perla. Now that we've done a pretty simple design that has a satin stitch, let's try to digitize something with a fill stitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a design. We'll make it the four-leaf clover here. I'm going to resize this design and make it about 3 inches in height, and it will resize proportionately. And then I'm going to zoom in to 300%. If you've ever watched my videos, you know that I do digitize at either 300 or 600%. It's one of my rules that I've had since day one, and really what it does is it allows me to actually see on screen what I see on the machine so over and over again, and I really don't have to guess how things are going to turn out. So I'm going to put my points in using my line tool, hold the control key down, and I'm going to do the stem of this four-leaf clover, go over to the other side, hold the control key down again. It's going to curve, come back to straight, and then I'm going to right click. Okay, now once I right click, I'm going to tell it to be a satin stitch. I'm going to put my inclination points in, just drag them from one side all the way across, right click again. Then I can move my start point and my stop point. I'm going to move them right up into the top here, and I'm going to press enter. So now I have a satin stitch for the stem. Now let's do our fill stitch. I'm going to choose my line tool again, and I'm going to hold the control key down, and I'm going to very quickly outline around this clover. And that's one of the beautiful things about digitizing at 300 or 600%, is you have to remember that you are zoomed in. You can move fairly quickly, you can be off a little bit, I can be a millimeter off either direction, and it really doesn't make a difference, because when it actually sews, it's not sewing out at 300%, it sews out at the original size, which is 100%. So it really gives you the ability to have some fun, to ease up a little, and to just enjoy digitizing instead of having it being painstaking. Okay, so now I have all my points. I'm going to close that shape. I'm going to tell it to be a satin stitch, and now I have a satin stitch going, or sorry, a fill stitch, and I have a fill stitch going across the front here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste that fill stitch, so I'm going to have 2 fill stitches running in a row. And then that second fill, because really it is just a piece of artwork, I'm going to tell that to be a motif run. I'm going to do a really cool run stitch, and then I can start playing with some of the colors. I want the outside of that to be green, and I would like the stem to be the same color green, a darker green, and then I'm going to tell the fill to be, let's say, a lighter green. And now I have a really cool four-leaf clover that just isn't regular embroidery. I've used a motif. Now I'm going to move my stem down in the sewing order, okay, and probably right above, let's see here, right above the motif stitch. So we're going to place it right there. That way it's going to do the fill stitch first, then it will do the stem, and then it is going to do the motif run around the outside, so that when you do your redraw, and again I'll speed it up and I'll click the start button, it's going to start sewing that design, and you're going to see that the fill is going to be laid down first, and after it finishes the fill it will do the stem, which is right underneath of the motif. You have to watch the sewing order of a design to make sure that it's going to sew in the proper order. But it's going to give you a really cool effect. We're going to fast forward a little bit through this. You're going to see that those stitches are going down. It's doing the stem, and then it's going to continue to do the motif around the edge, and the design's going to be finished. Now we're going to digitize our last design together, and this one's going to be kind of cool. I'm going to open up a new window, and I'm going to choose a piece of artwork which is a little bit flat looking and almost cartoony. We're going to choose a sunflower, bring it into the working area, and the size looks fine, so I'm going to keep it at that size, and I'm going to go up to 600%. Now the reason why we're going to have fun with this is we're not going to just use regular satin stitches and have this look like a flat piece of embroidery. We're going to try to bring it to life using some creative stitch effects and stitch angles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my line tool. I'm going to change, let's say, to a pink color, just so that we can see it on the screen as I'm I'm working, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tie in my stitch and just put a little bit of underlay back and forth like that, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to tell it to be a running stitch. Now if you look at that, I have a running stitch there. Now the reason why I put in that underlay there manually instead of automatically is it's just faster for me. It's faster than going in and turning on the settings. I can very quickly move around and give it the effect that I want. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to very quickly outline this first petal, and I'm going to kind of stagger it into the outside and then stagger it to the outside, close that shape, turn it into a column stitch, and then I'll kind of fan it from the outside of each point so I have a nice fan stitching, and I'm going to right click, and I want the design to start right here and I want it to stop on the other side because I ended here, I stop here, that way there'll be no trims, and then I'm going to right click and it's going to actually turn it into a satin stitch. But instead of a regular satin stitch, if I do this, let's turn it into a random fill, now I have a very realistic looking petal that's going to sew out really nicely. So let's continue on. I'm going to go back and I'm going to come over here, put in some underlay, and I'll just come over to the side like I did before. I'm going to right click, turn that into a running stitch, and then I'm going to go back to my line. I'll go here, I'll outline this one, and I'll just continue on and outline all of my pieces. Make sure that I have some overlap in there, close that shape, turn on my column stitch, and I'll just again fan the pieces from one side to the other. I'm going to right click, I'm going to make sure that I start right there, end right there, and I'm going to come in and tell it to generate the stitches. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until all of these are done, and then I'm going to tell it to make it into a random all at the same time. It just is going to save me a little bit of time overall. So I'm going to come back over here, continue to do this, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to make that into a running stitch, and I'll continue to do each of these little pieces. I'm using the arrow keys to scroll around the design, go over to this side, make sure that I overlap on that side, turn this one into a run stitch as well, and we're going to make sure that we fan it, and then I'm going to make sure that I bring that stitch over, fan it, and I'm going to choose my start point right over here, my end point over here. I'm going to hit the enter button, and now I'm going to go and do another traveling stitch. The way you like to see your design sew on your machine is the way you travel with your traveling stitches. It makes perfect logical sense. Turn that into a run stitch, come back over here, and we're just going to continue on and do all of these petals and make sure that it is done relatively quickly. I'm almost done all of the outside petals. We just have one more to finish. I'm going to again put in my underlay stitches for this petal. I'm going to right click, turn it into a run stitch, go back to my line tool, go around the outside, define this area, bring it in so that it's going to fan in towards the center, close that shape, choose my column stitch, fan this a little bit so that it goes from one side to the other, right click, have my start point, have my stop point, and then I'm going to enter or right click again, and now I have all of my outside pieces done. Now I'm going to turn my 3D off because now I'll be able to see the screen a little bit better, and I can see that I want to do these petals in a certain order. Okay, I'm going to start with this one right here, and then I'll start to move myself around the design and move around this way. So I'm going to go back to my run stitch. I'm going to go to 600% just to make sure I'm at the right scale, and I'm going to start right here where I left off, and again I'll put in some underlay stitches, and I'll right click, turn that into a run stitch, go back to my line tool, and I'll start to outline this one here, and doing pretty much the exact same thing as I did before, making sure there's some overlap, closing that shape, turning it into a column stitch, and I'll just fan this one the same way I did the others, and I'm going to right click. I want to make sure that I start right there and end over here, and then I'm going to enter that point, and I'll continue on and put my underlay stitches in this petal. Again, enter, turn it into a run stitch, go back to my line, put my points down, make sure that I overlap on the inside a little bit, close that shape, make it into a satin stitch, make sure that I turn this ever so slightly so I get that nice effect. Start, stop on the other side, and then we're going to enter that, go back to the running stitch with the line, put in my underlay on this one. This is a pretty wide area, so I want to make sure that I do have some extra running stitches. I know that the software is automatically going to put an edge run underlay on there, but I want to make sure that I also put in a little bit extra in towards the centers so that we don't have any problems with this design puckering. We know that if we put enough underlay in a design, then we should only ever need to have one piece of stabilizer to stabilize it, and the design should sew out nice and smoothly. And we're just going to continue on, start and stop, and then we're going to generate, and we'll continue with the rest of them. Now we're almost done the inside petals, so we're just going to go back to our line tool, and we're going to put some more underlay in these wide areas of the design. Right click, turn that into a running stitch, go back to my line tool, and we're going to outline this very last petal, and once that's done we make sure we come to the inside so that there's an adequate amount of overlap, close that shape, turn it into a column stitch, and we'll fan this one as well, sort of fanning out from one side to the other. Right click, make sure that I start close to where I ended, and we're going to stop right down here, and we're going to generate those stitches. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can see the entire design. I'll go to 400%, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the 3D on, because what we're going to have is a flower that is all satin stitches. Now here's what I want to do. I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab that entire area. I'm going to go to my fill stitch and I'm going to turn it from a standard fill into a random fill and press apply, and now all of those objects that are inside of there are going to become that random stitch. And the stitches were too long to be a satin stitch before, and all they would do is snag, but now we have a very realistic looking flower and we're ready to put the outlines on it. Now I'm going to select that flower up in the sequence view. Once it's selected, I'm going to change the color to a yellow because this is supposed to be a sunflower, and I'm going to turn off the 3D so that I can see all of the black in behind there that I want to finish off with the details. Now here's the thing, I don't really have a really clear picture of that because it's being covered by all of the gold stitching in there. So I'm going to use that little trick I showed you at the beginning of this tutorial. I'm going to close that eye. Now the embroidery is still really there, but I've closed the eye, which means that I can now work around this and do the detail and not have to, worry about seeing what's underneath. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose the line tool again, and I'm going to change my color to a black color, and I'm going to start right here where I left off, and I'm just going to very quickly travel around this design and outline these objects. I am going to go to my 300% scale and then my 600% scale. I do want to have a pretty clear picture of this, and I'm going to have two passes of thread. So I have one pass, I'll just go back over top of those lines, and this is really how you will do a redwork design as well. You have to kind of think it out logically and map the sewing order. If there's ever a point I don't like, I can always hit the backspace button on your keyboard. If you hit the backspace button on your keyboard, it will actually go back however many points points that you have put into place, and I'll continue kind of around the outside of this design, just putting in points, and I'll complete the outside area first. So I'm just going to keep putting in the points, going all the way around, and I'm not really worrying about using a curve stitch, because at 600%, if I put in a curve, you're not really going to see it anyways when it sews out. This is, really 600% is quite a bit moved out from your design. When we go back to our true scale, which is 1:1, again, you won't see any big differences with regards to being a millimeter or two off at 6:1. It really gives you the freedom to digitize and not have to worry that every single point is exactly on top of each other. I've seen a lot of people when they're digitizing, it's really painful for me to watch them, because it is like they are diffusing a bomb. They're worried that every point has to be perfectly on top of each other for there to have a good result, and that just is not the case. You can move pretty quickly as long as you're at the right scale, and it is going to sew out nicely, look beautiful, and you'll be happy with the results. So again, just moving around the outside. I always tell people that it's almost like, Hansel and Gretel in the forest. They leave breadcrumbs, and the way you digitize is you have to follow back over top of the breadcrumbs that you have laid down. That way you're not getting lost. That's why I'm kind of staying towards the outside of this design. And if I stay towards the outside of the design, then I always know that I can find my way back to where I need to be. Another example that I've been using for years is, digitizing. There's a lot of common sense, just like a lot of the things that you might normally do in your household, like, washing a floor, or hanging wallpaper, or vacuuming. When you do those types of things, you always have a bit of a game plan first. You don't wash a floor and start at one end of the room and then wash the floor, put yourself into a corner, because you'll have to sit there and wait for the floor to dry. So I'm just literally going over areas, and then I'm going back over top, and when I'm done I will have exactly 2 passes of thread in every single area, not 3 passes in some areas and 1 pass in another area. If you ever have a design that is not perfectly done with mapping, then it does look visually like there is a mistake. Okay, I'm again using my arrow keys as I'm panning around this design, and you can see now I'm traveling back over the areas that I was before, and I'm now completing the areas that I didn't get to on the larger petals. So I'm coming to this intersection here, and I am going to continue around that one. Here I'm going to have 2 passes of thread, 2 passes of thread. I already had 2 passes on that petal that I just passed. I come over here. This has no passes, so I'm going to put a pass going over that one, back over to this side, and just continuing on. It doesn't take that long to do this. Digitizing is one of those things that, yes, you are being creative, you're laying down lots of points, but if you take the time to learn how to do it properly, then the end results give you lots of satisfaction. And after a while, there isn't anything that you can't create, and that's the beauty of it. Pretty much anything that you have as a backdrop, whether it is a flower or an animal or even simple objects, it's no big deal. So there, I am done. I'm going to right click. I'm going to turn that into a run stitch, and I have a single run with 3 millimeters, and I'm going to apply it. Now if I look at this on 3D and we turn back on our eye, so that our eye is going to come on, you're going to visually see now that I have outlined all of my petals. And as I zoom back from this, let's just go to 300% and now to 100%, because that is reality. You can see how beautiful that's starting to look. Now all we have to do is finish the center of this flower and we're done. It didn't take me that long at all, but I'm going to show you a couple little tricks, because we're going to play with the software and again try to create something that's dimensional and real looking. Now we just have the center of this sunflower to do. So I'm going to turn off the 3D and I'm going to zoom back into my 600% scale, and I'm going to choose my ellipse tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a circle, but I'm going to hold down the control key as I do. So when I have this circle in place, I can just place it perfectly over top there, just like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a different color. So we're going to make it a different color, and I am going to grab that piece of artwork and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to paste another one on top of that. Okay, now the reason why is there's no use for me to redraw this over again when I've already drawn it perfectly once. Now that last one, I am going to change that back to black, and I'm going to turn that into a running stitch because I want to have a running stitch around there, but I'm going to make sure that it is either a double run if I want it to look the same as the outlines of the petals, but I'm going to make it a triple run, which is a bean stitch, and that's going to even make it look a little bit thicker. Now my other pieces of artwork, this one I'm going to turn into a regular fill stitch, okay? And I'm going to choose a random pattern as well, or maybe something like snake skin. I'll just choose a little bit of a different pattern in there, and you'll kind of see what it looks like when it comes onto 3D. So I have a random pattern inside of there. Now what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take that second one and I'm going to tell it to be a radial column stitch. Now when I do the radial column stitch, it is going to be a radial stitch on top, and it's going to look really cool, but I'm going to change the density up a little bit, maybe to 1.5 millimeters, so that it is a little looser. See, I have the base fill underneath, which is going to give it nice coverage on the material, and then that radial fill, which is really loose on top, is going to give it a little bit of extra texture. So I haven't affected the design in making it, bulletproof for stitch intensive, but I've actually used the software to create something that's visually going to look pretty awesome. So we are actually done. It's as simple as that. I now have a beautiful sunflower that looks textured. It looks real. I've taken a little bit of time to digitize it, but for the results you get when this sews out, it's well worth it. Now I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Watch it over and over again. Call up these lessons. Practice and play. That's the biggest thing with digitizing, is learning how to use the tools, and then it just becomes repetitive and you can create anything you desire.